This is quite unusual that we have this reading from the book of Genesis, our first reading, from the story of the fall of humanity, man and woman, Adam and Eve. And then we have this Gospel of Mark. And what I would like to say to you is that there's a man and a woman at the beginning of creation, and there's a man and a woman at the beginning of the new creation. So we see in the book of Genesis, Adam, after the man Adam had eaten of the tree, the Lord calls, "Where are you?" And Adam, of course, is hiding himself because he had eaten the fruit. And then Eve as well, she was hidden, and God asked why she did that. And the serpent tricked me, so I ate it, she said. This is the beginning of creation. This is where Adam and Eve fell, and humanity fell with them. It is always important for us to know about that, to know about the first two books of Genesis, because that tells us about who we are, about what creation is, and about what our relationship with God is, and how it is now fallen because of the sin of Adam and Eve. It's a beautiful thing to be a Catholic, because as Catholics, we understand Genesis, the spiritual and the teaching that it gives us about our relationship with God, about ourselves, who we are as human, rather than the literal realities of God created the world in 7 days, that we need to believe that was 7 24-hour periods. Rather, it conveys a truth about who we are, who God is, and what our relationship is with him, and what creation itself is. And so we see, as I said, a woman and a man, Adam and Eve. And I said it's interesting that we have this gospel because we have the new creation here. We have Jesus, and we're in Mark's gospel now, and we have Jesus and also Mary, a man and a woman. Of course, Jesus is the God-man, unlike Adam, and Mary is the new Eve. Jesus is the new Adam. And so I say this is unique because in the first and the reading in the gospel, we have the first Adam and the first Eve, and then we have the second Adam and the second Eve. And what Satan was able to do to trick Adam and Eve, to get them to sin, to be disobedient to God, Jesus and Mary came to undo. Jesus and Mary came to heal. And so we see here in Mark's gospel, Jesus is casting out demons a lot. He's casting out demons a lot. I just want to go through and point out the reality of evil in that Jesus is confronting in Mark's gospel. And so in chapter 1 in Mark, Jesus is tempted, of course, by Satan in the desert. We know about that. And then as we're continuing still in Mark chapter 1, there was in the synagogue a man with an unclean spirit. And we hear in detail what happens here. The man cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us?" Yeah, that's why Jesus came. He came to destroy what Adam and Eve fell to, the evil influence of the devil in disobedience. "Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." You see, Jesus is different than Adam. Jesus has authority. Well, Adam had a certain authority, being in God, but Jesus has an authority and he is obedient to God, where Adam was not obedient. And so by his authority, Jesus says, "Be quiet, come out of him." Jesus rebuked him, and so the unclean spirit came out and convulsing. And then everyone said, "What is this new authority? He commands unclean spirits, and they come out and they obey him." And so as we go through chapter 1, 2, and 3 of Mark, we're in Mark right now with our gospel reading, as we go through, we see how he's casting out demons over and over again. And so later on, he comes and he heals Simon's mother-in-law. And then that evening, it says at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed by demons, and he cast out many demons. And then still in chapter 1, it says that he went throughout Galilee preaching in their synagogue and casting out demons. Why did Jesus come? He came to overthrow the power of Satan and sin in the world. Jesus is the new Adam. He's the one who restores us and he recreates us. And then if we move on to chapter 3 of Mark, we see A summary statement again. And whenever the unclean spirits saw Jesus, they fell before him and they cried out, "You are the Son of God." And so when we come to today's passage, the scribes who come from Jerusalem say, "He's possessed by Beelzebul, the prince of demons. That's why he's casting out demons." And then Jesus goes in and he says, "A kingdom divided among itself cannot stand." But then he says in verse 27, "But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man. Then indeed he can plunder his house." Well, this is a little hard to understand. What Jesus is saying is, no one can enter a strong man's house. Who's the strong man? What's his house? It's Satan. It's his authority that he has over humanity since the fall of Adam and Eve. So no one can enter a strong man's house, Satan's house, and plunder his goods. Plunder his goods. His goods are you and me. We're under the influence of Satan, or I should say at the time of Jesus, they were under influence of Satan because of the fall of Adam and Eve. And so they were possessed by demons in different ways, under the influence of evil. Unless he first binds the strong man, then indeed he can plunder his house. Jesus came to bind the devil. Jesus came to bind the strong man, the one who had authority over humanity since the fall of Adam and Eve. Then indeed he can plunder his house. Jesus came for war. Can you imagine that? Jesus came for war. He came to do battle with the devil, and he overthrew him, and he threw him out, and he gives us the gift of freedom. That's why St. Paul, when he's preaching, he's talking about the salvation, the freedom, the sanctification, the authority that we have as the children of God because of what Jesus did in the gospel. And like I said, Jesus is the new Adam. And now we continue this reading from our gospel, and we're not even to chapter 4 yet of Mark's gospel. And then he speaks about, we see Jesus' mother. Jesus' mother says nothing. Nothing in Mark's gospel. Jesus' mother says nothing. Nothing in Matthew's gospel. Only in Luke's gospel. Only in John's gospel does Mary say anything. But she's powerful. She is powerful. Why is she powerful? Well, many reasons. Because God chose her, number one. But why is she powerful? Because at the end of this gospel reading, Jesus says, "Who are my mother and my brothers and my sisters?" And looking around at those who were sitting there, he said, "Here are my mother and my brethren. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother." You see, Adam and Eve came and they did not do the will of God. They were disobedient. They ate the forbidden fruit. Jesus and Mary come and they do the will of God. And Mary, being totally human, Jesus, of course, totally human, but also totally divine. Mary, of course, she is the one who is fully human and only human who fully carries out God's will. And so she is a brother, a sister of his, a mother of his. And so once again, we see the man and a woman in the first creation, Adam and Eve, and the fall. And we see the influence that the evil has, which is on display here at the beginning of Mark's gospel. And then we see a man and a woman at the beginning of a new creation, Jesus and Mary. And so this is an opportunity for us to rejoice. We see this, and so this is where we as Catholics see the intricacy, the interwoven reality that God desires that there be a man and a woman at the new creation as there was at the first creation, Jesus and Mary. And we see this liturgically today and yesterday. Again, if you're thinking about what was the liturgical celebration today on Saturday, the morning, before we get to the eve, and what was the celebration that we had yesterday? I give you a moment to think so that you can think about that. Of course, yesterday we celebrated the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the man. Today we celebrated the Immaculate Heart of Mary, the woman. Their hearts only wanted to do what God wanted them to do. That's the Immaculate Heart of Mary. That's the Sacred Heart of Jesus. That's the new creation. That's where Adam and Eve fell, and Mary and Jesus and Mary come and they save us. And you know, I love this image, this statue that we have of Mary in our adoration chapel. In our adoration chapel. If you've been in our adoration chapel, she is there. And how do you deal with evil? How do you deal with evil? Mary is really showing us something, how you deal with evil. Now, there's many ways that you deal with evil, but the preeminent and the most important way you deal with evil is what Mary is doing in that statue. She's praying. And I love that statue because in the midst of evil being close to her, if you look at the bottom of her, there's the snake there. The serpent is there. The devil is there. And he's got the apple in his mouth. We don't know if it was an apple, but the fruit in his mouth. And so, this is very important because one question is, how do we deal with evil? How do we deal with the devil and demons? Very calmly, as a matter of fact. Very calmly. Like I say, Mary's an image of this, that statue in there. She is like this. She has her head bowed. Somebody put a rosary in her hand. Very nice. And she's given over to doing the will of God. Whoever does the will of God is my brother, my sister, and my mother, Jesus says in our gospel here today. And she's stepping on the head of the snake. I think that's so instructive for us because we can get very uptight and upset about evil. Well, I suppose we can go in two directions, right? It's everywhere. The devil made me do it. It's not my fault. Or we can be like, well, the devil really doesn't exist. Do we still believe in that? Both are errors, terrible errors that can lead us to hell if we're not careful. They're both terrible errors, but Mary gives us the most important way that we look upon evil. We pray. We do the will of God, and we're calm. And we step on the devil with Mary. Mary steps on the devil, and she crushes his head, as it alludes to in the book of Genesis. So, what is our takeaway for this? There was a creation in the beginning, Genesis. There was a man and a woman, and there was a fall. Jesus came for a new creation, the man and the woman, Jesus and Mary. And Mary shows us how we overcome the evil. As Jesus prayed so much when he was here on earth, and he had that profound relationship with his Father, and he sought to do the Father's will, so we're called to do that as well, to pray. To seek to do God's will. What are we going to pray? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven, in a few moments as we pray the Our Father here. So we pray, as Mary shows us as well, we seek to do the will of God, and we're very calm about it. I invite you to go to the Adoration Chapel to look at that statue. It tells us the reality of evil that there is in the world, and it tells us the calmness that we can have when we are in God, as Mary was, as we try to do God's will, and as we pray, seeking to do God's will, we're actually crushing the head of the serpent. So, if you want to know how to deal with evil, go to Mary, go to Jesus. They teach us to pray, to do God's will, and to be calm with the real reality of evil there is in the world, to be calm, trusting in God, doing his will, and praying to God.